Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Sauce. Got another SEC matchup here. And this one, after last week's matchups, this is kind of more interesting than I thought it would be. You got Kentucky on the road at Georgia. Georgia laying 14.5 points at home here. Was at 15, dropped a half point. Total sitting at 48. Let's do it.
Welcome to The Sauce. The Sauce. Hey, get the sauce.
So the public came in heavy on Kentucky early. Like I said, this line was at 15. It dropped to 14.5. Still has not hit 14 even, and I don't know if it will. Because if you look at the data from Monday morning till now, it looks like the bets are actually starting to come in on Georgia, so we'll have to keep an eye on this one. Well, why don't we start out with some head-to-head history, and it's pretty one-sided here. I mean, Georgia has absolutely dominated this rivalry, if you can even call it that. The Bulldogs have taken 14 straight games against Kentucky with an average margin of victory of 16 points. So they haven't just been beating Kentucky, they've been beating the shit out of Kentucky. But I gotta say, this Kentucky team looks a little different. As you know, I had Florida plus 1.5 last week. Obviously, I got crushed on that bet. But it wasn't just the fact that Kentucky beat Florida at home. That didn't shock me. I was just really impressed with how they did it. Ray Davis and the Kentucky offensive line absolutely butchered Florida's defensive front seven. Ray Davis rushed for 280 yards on 10.8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. I mean, that run game could not be stopped. The Kentucky Wildcats offense is averaging 6.8 yards per carry on the season. 6.8 yards per carry. That's first in the entire country. They're 30th in rush yards per game, 32nd in effective rush. And here's the weirdest part. Kentucky's not even really a running team. I mean, Kentucky's just 78th in run frequency, 56th in pass frequency. I mean, they're pretty balanced. But Kentucky's closer to a passing program than it is a rushing program. They had Will Levis the last couple years. Then they bring in Devin Leary through the transfer portal. I did not expect the Kentucky offense to be running the ball like this. And you might be thinking, well, party's over. It was fun, but now the party's over because they're in Athens and they got to try to run the ball in Georgia's defense. Well, here's the thing. Georgia's run defense does not look like the Georgia run defense we're used to seeing. In fact, analytically speaking, Georgia isn't even a top 25 run defense right now. Georgia's just 32nd in rushing yards allowed per game, 58th in yards per carry, and they're rated just 32nd in effective rush. Florida was rated 36th in effective rush last week. Obviously, we know Georgia's defensive front is way better than Florida's. I'm just pointing out that numbers-wise, Georgia's run defense hasn't been all that great this year. This is the lowest Georgia's defense has been ranked in the last 5 years. Bulldogs defense is currently ranked 15th overall. They've never been outside the top 5 in the last 5 years. And here's where it gets even uglier for Georgia. Look at the offenses they've seen. I mean, up to this point, South Carolina at 50th and UAB at 75th. That's the 2 most efficient offenses on Georgia's schedule so far. How are they 58th in the country in yards per carry allowed with this schedule? On paper, Kentucky will be the strongest offense Georgia's seen so far this year by a pretty big margin, actually. Kentucky's got the 26th best offense in the FBS according to BetaRank. The good news for Georgia defensively would be despite Kentucky having a surprisingly efficient physical rushing attack this year, Devin Leary really hasn't been that good at quarterback. Even in the Florida game where they won comfortably, Kentucky put up 33 points. Devin Leary was just 9 of 19 with 69 yards passing, a 95.2 passer rating. That is not a good game. And he really hasn't been good all season. Now, the positive for Devin Leary would be his experience. We know he can play in big games. I mean, we saw Devin Leary throw for 4 touchdowns and beat Clemson in double overtime a couple years ago. He beat Florida State twice. In fact, Devin Leary's never lost to Florida State as a starter. So Devin Leary may not be having the best season, or the best start to a season, I should say. But we know he's not the type of quarterback that's going to be intimidated by going into Athens to play Georgia. He's played in several games of this magnitude at North Carolina State. I wouldn't be surprised if Devin Leary comes out and plays a great game. Now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball, and somehow it's kind of the same story with Georgia's rushing game that it is with their run defense. I mean, we're used to seeing this absolutely dominant rushing attack from Georgia. We've seen it for years. I mean, all the way back to Todd Gurley, Noshawn Marino, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift. I mean, Georgia always has a badass run game, which is why it's almost insane to see their rushing numbers on the year against not the greatest competition. I mean, did I accidentally pull up Georgia Tech's numbers here? This cannot be the Georgia run game I'm looking at. Just 66th in rush yards per game, 59th in yards per carry, and 76th in effective rush. 76th. Last year, Georgia was 7th in the FBS in effective rush. This year, 76th. Now, I'm sure part of it is losing Branson Robinson. He was supposed to be RB1 heading into the season. He's been hurt and he's out for the year, so he's not coming back. So that doesn't help. But regardless, Georgia's always been the type of program, plug and play at running back. Whoever's in there could work. Georgia's run game should not be this bad. Surprisingly enough, the bright spot on this Georgia offense has been Carson Beck, man. I mean, he's coming off the best game of his career, 313 yards on 69.7% completions, a 153 passer rating. Now, statistically, that wasn't the best game of his career, but Georgia's had really weak competition for the first month of the season. So last week on the road at Auburn was really their first test. And Carson Beck showed up in a big way. He played well. And Kentucky's defense is every bit as good as Auburn's this year. 23rd overall, according to Beta Rank. Auburn's 21st, for reference. So they're right there. 17th in effective rush, 39th in effective pass. So I hope Carson Beck's ready to step up to the plate in back-to-back weeks here, because this is a good run defense, and Georgia hasn't been able to run the ball. Carson Beck's going to need to be good again. All right, as far as what I'm betting, honestly, this reminds me a lot of the A&M Alabama game. What I said at the end of that, you can like copy and paste that same sentence. On paper, based on what we've seen this year, the bet is Kentucky, without a doubt. I mean, 14.5. You can probably make an argument that Kentucky's played better than Georgia this year. I know that sounds crazy, but just based on what we've seen this year alone, Kentucky plus 14.5 has to be the play. Obviously, is there a chance that 2022 Georgia shows up and just blows us out? Of course there is. It's Georgia. It's Kirby Smart. But I'm following the numbers here. I'm taking the 14.5. Really like what I saw from Kentucky's run game last week. They're playing with a lot of confidence, and I think they're coming into Athens thinking they can win this game. So give me Kentucky plus 14.5. I think it's great value. If you want my top bets, parlays of the day, if you want to join our Discord, or you want to get on the NFL Against the Spread giveaway competition, head over to KyleKirms.com. All the information's right there on the homepage. College football, week 6. A lot of value on the board. Let's have ourselves a good weekend. Remember to bet responsibly, and I'll talk to you on the Discord.